Here's what's coming up on Network Africa. Guinea junta leader denounces West, asks it to stop lecturing Africa amid wave of coups. U.S. contractor charged with spying for Ethiopia. And Sudan's Rapid Support Forces leader says he's ready for ceasefire and political dialogue. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. In Lagos, we begin at the United Nations General Assembly, where Guinea's junta leader's unexpected speech. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya asked the UN to stop lecturing Africa, saying the continent is suffering from a model of governance that was imposed and is not working. He defended the use of military intervention, calling Western democracy ineffective at adapting to the African reality. Colonel Doumbouya took power in a coup in 2021, ousting President Alpha Condé. He defended the action to the UN General Assembly as one taken to save the country from complete chaos. At the time, news of the coup was greeted by excited crowds in the capital, Conakry, as many were relieved that President Condé had been deposed. But Guinea was suspended from ECOWAS in the wake of the military takeover, with regional leaders calling for a return to civilian rule. Still at Anga, one thing that African leaders seem to be united on is their desire to terminate the mandate of a team of human rights experts on Ethiopia after the submission of its latest report earlier this week. According to the expert panel's report, war crimes and crimes against humanity are still being committed in spite of the cessation of hostilities agreement officially ending the war in Tigray, which warring parties signed. An Ethiopian delegate accused the commission of failing to recognize the government's efforts while engaging in defamatory rhetoric with questionable methodology. The African group is urging Ethiopia to explore domestic measures of accountability. And an Ethiopian-born U.S. contractor, Abraham Teklulema, has been arrested and charged with sending classified information to Ethiopia. According to the Justice Department, Abraham, who worked at the State and Justice Departments, started passing information since last August to an official associated with Ethiopia's intelligence service. He faces 3 charges, including gathering or delivering defense information to aid a foreign government and unauthorized possession of national defense information and willfully retaining it. Mr. Abraham, who could face the death penalty if convicted of espionage, is a naturalized U.S. citizen of Ethiopian descent living in Silver Spring, Maryland. We're now in Sudan, where Sudan's Rapid Support Forces are indicating that they're prepared for a ceasefire and to engage in comprehensive political talks for an end to its civil conflicts with the army. RSF leader Dagalo, known as Hemedti, made the comments in a recorded video message addressed to the UN General Assembly and released by the RSF shortly before Army leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan was due to give a speech to the Assembly in New York. Meanwhile, in his UN speech, Army leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan called on the international community to designate the paramilitary RSF as a terrorist organization and come against its sponsors outside of Sudan. And with the war in Sudan showing no signs of abating, the United Nations is raising alarm over the health risk of children and refugees. The next report takes a look at the humanitarian situation in parts of the country where access to healthcare and daily survival has taken a drastic turn.
This is one of the few medical facilities still operating in the Sudanese city of Omdurman. Civilians trapped here amid the raging war between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese army are struggling to access medical care. With a severe shortage of necessary medications, especially for the people with chronic diseases, some patients have suffered complications such as amputations, according to health officials. Nearly 6 months into the conflict, the country's healthcare sector is on its knees due to direct attacks from the warring parties as well as shortages of staff and medicines.
Because of the war, the medications are not available, and so the complications began to show, such as amputating limbs, which happened to a number of patients, as well as the effect on kidneys.
Residents are also struggling to make ends meet, with many unable to afford as little as a loaf of bread.
We have not received our salaries for 4 or 5 months, which created an abundance in food products of all sorts, including wheat, as well as other products. But the real problem is that people are not able to buy because simply they don't have money.
Sudan has the highest number of internally displaced people globally, according to a recent report from the international NGO Save the Children. At least 7.1 million people, including an estimated 3.3 million children, are now displaced from their homes across the country, more than double the 3.2 million IDPs prior to the conflict that erupted mid-April. Diseases including cholera, malaria, and fevers, as well as malnutrition, are threatening millions of children. The United Nations said this week that more than 1,200 children have died in refugee camps since May, with thousands more at risk.
On the back of a cruel disregard for civilians and relentless attacks on health facilities, UNICEF fears that many thousands of newborns will die between now and the end of the year. 330,000 children will be born in Sudan between October and December. They and their mothers, as you heard, do need skilled delivery care.
The United Nations also says ethnically motivated attacks have killed hundreds in Sudan's West Darfur region. More than 1.8 million people are expected to flee from Sudan to 5 neighboring countries by the end of the year. Tensions between the army and RSF, which jointly staged a coup in 2021, erupted into fighting over a plan to integrate their forces as part of a transition to civilian rule. While several countries have launched mediation efforts, none have succeeded in bringing a halt to the fighting.
And as the UN General Assembly debate continued into its third day, human rights lawyer Amal Clooney and world leaders pleaded for more international attention on the war in Sudan and for accountability in the fighting that has killed thousands and displaced millions of civilians. Mrs. Clooney, who is Special Advisor to the International Criminal Court prosecutor on the situation in Darfur, is horrified at violence that broke out in Darfur in April of this year. The event was hosted by the US, Canada, Gambia, Norway, and the United Kingdom to bring attention to the Sudan conflict and ensure justice.
In April of this year, war returned once again to Darfur. Almost 4 years to the day after a peaceful protest movement dislodged Omar al-Bashir, the former president, now wanted by the International Criminal Court. Since that time, at least 5,000 people have been killed across Sudan, 12,000 injured. There are credible reports of rape and gang rape, some incidents taking place in public and some involving children as young as 12. The tragedy that I am describing is one that we've seen before. We literally could be having this conversation 20 years ago. Targeted ethnic violence, the burning of villages, mass murder and fleeing civilian, that was Darfur 2 decades ago. And now this nightmare is unfolding again. Why? We all know it's because those responsible for the crimes were never forced to answer for them.
And while the atrocities in Darfur are clearly being perpetrated by the Rapid Support Forces and allied militias, we should be clear that both sides, including the Sudanese armed forces, bear responsibility for plunging Sudan back into war. So we repeat our call to the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces to end this bloodshed and negotiate a permanent ceasefire in good faith, because it is Sudanese civilians who are bearing the brunt of this brutal conflict.
Kareem, if I may start.
Africa Missions Global, a faith-based non-profit organization founded in 1996, has held its first edition of an initiative known as Horizon 2033 in Manhattan, New York. The initiative, targeted at impacting 100 million lives by the year 2033, is founded by the visionary of Africa Missions Global, Pastor Mrs. Folu Adeboye, and her husband, the General Overseer of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Pastor Enoch Adeboye, to empower humanity through charitable causes of providing education, water, healthcare, and empowerment, especially for women and children. Our correspondent, Anwar Wado, reports.
The inaugural edition of Horizon 2033 in Manhattan, New York, opens with guests from all walks of life coming together to celebrate the vision of this initiative. It begins with the unveiling of the new brand visual.
The new brand visual, you say, is not just a design. It is a representation of our spirit. It symbolizes the boundless energy and determination that fuels our mission to drive positive change worldwide. It stands for young lives aspiring to reach their full potential and embrace the values that underpin community and nation building. However, we cannot embark on this journey without acknowledging the challenges that lie before us.
The visionary, Pastor Mrs. Folu Adeboye, explains the inspiration behind Horizon 2033, connecting it to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations.
Horizon 2033 aims to impact 100 million lives in Africa and globally by 2033. We will do this through community-based social intervention programs that focus primarily on making value-based, inclusive, and equitable quality education more readily available to historically disadvantaged communities.
The role of faith-based organizations cannot be overemphasized.
There's a lot of challenges around the world. We know the impacts of the climate challenge. We know the impacts of the COVID pandemic. We know the impacts of many unsolved conflicts, which are really crippling our continent, not because we're the cause, but because we happen to be the unintended recipients of the outcomes. And for that, I think the solutions really lie at the community. And so having community-based organizations and faith-based organizations work together with business, with governments to deliver is very, very important. After all, change is what really starts at the community level.
For the First Lady of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, the best legacy to leave behind is one that will have a ripple effect.
Africa is a great nation, is the giant of nations. But this is the way to start. The partnership will get from here. And I was discussing with my parents in the Lord this morning before we entered the room. I said, I don't want to build any building. I just want to invest in lives. And I think with the Renewed Hope initiative we started is one life at a time. And life is very, very important. Buildings will crumble, but you know, as long as you have blood flowing in your veins, you keep going.
For charitable causes such as this, great partnerships are important.
At the African Export-Import Bank, we believe that the only way we will achieve the SDGs is if we can trade with one another. And how do we trade with one another? We need to produce. How do we produce? We need to educate our youth. And the vision and the objectives of Horizon 2023 fit into the objectives of the bank in that regard.
This vision of Dear Mommy Gio is one of those opportunities that we have to accelerate in the area of education, especially the giving of quality education.
When we all determine that I will do something, the world will be a different place. It will be a better place.
Governors of Lagos and Akwa Ibom State laud the initiative, pledging their support.
Being of agriculture is actually in the rural areas. So we're doing just that, and it coincides with the vision that Horizon 2033 has. So we'll be pleased to work with them. It's such a big work that you're doing, Mommy. It's lofty, lofty vision, but I trust God that as in all other visions of the Redeemed Christian Church, this is already succeeding and it will continue to succeed.
This also fits in clearly with our own vision as a state. And I'm truly, truly glad that at this time we can join you. We can join you with all of the goals that have been set by other world leaders, the Sustainable Development Goals 2030, the African Agenda 2033, the Horizon Vision 2033. It speaks to one thing, that all of us need to work collaboratively together, and we need to do it quicker, faster, and bigger.
And life patron of African Missions Global.
The life patron of African Missions Global, Pastor Enoch Adeboye, who has supported his wife on this journey through the years, believes that the vision is achievable.
When a man living in a room in a slum part of Lagos tells you that God said he's going to build him a city, what will you call him? If you don't say a madman, you say a dreamer. Well, whether we believe it or not, God still being on his throne, within the next 10 years, African Mission Global will have touched at least 100 million lives.
With a successful outing of Horizon 2033 and several impactful initiatives over the years, the African Missions Global hopes to continue its mission of attaining the Sustainable Development Goals, thereby creating a better future for children in Africa and the world at large. From Manhattan, New York, Anne Nwawadu, Channels Television News.
Welcome back. And experts at the 2023 Africa Internet Governance Forum held in Abuja have reached a consensus on the need to address critical internet infrastructure, respect digital rights, and provide alternative power sources. These resolutions were deemed essential to promote inclusivity, security, and innovation within the African internet space. Our correspondent Victor Matthias reports that participants at the event came from various African nations to deliberate on matters aimed at enhancing internet governance through the continent.
Once again, stakeholders from various sectors, including government, civil society, the private sector, and players in the tech ecosystem, have gathered to engage in dialogue and possible exchange of ideas. This assembly is taking place at the African Internet Governance Forum 2023 with the theme, Transforming Africa's Digital Landscape, Empowering Inclusion, Security, and Innovation. The forum aims to address critical internet governance issues in the African region. The Minister of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy, Bosun Tijani, officially inaugurated the event virtually. He emphasized that Africa stands on the brink of a digital renaissance, presenting a golden opportunity to transform the internet into a tool that benefits everyone.
It is our collective duty to ensure that the internet remains open, safe, and beneficial for all. We must work towards bridging the digital divides, enhancing cybersecurity, ensuring digital rights, and fostering innovation.
During the panel sessions, speakers were direct and unreserved in expressing their views on what should take precedence to ensure inclusivity, security, and innovation as early as possible.
We may have the infrastructure, we may, push people to do transactions, but issues of freedom of expression, of course, in the rightful manner, issues of privacy, issues of how do we address, issues of misinformation or disinformation or fake news. How do we draw this balance? I think these are issues that we need to be looking at critically if we are going to spur innovation in Africa.
We have to address this fundamental issue of digital inequality. This has to be addressed at a national level and at an international level. These are digital global public goods that now have global implications around their governance if we're going to realize them at the national level.
Africa would do well to deploy infrastructure. And this deployment should be ubiquitous if at all we are going to ensure inclusiveness in the way and manner the internet is going to reach people not only within the major cities, but within the rural, unserved and underserved areas of our continent.
In addition to
the Executive Vice Chairman of the Nigerian Communications Commission, Professor Umar Dambata, pointed out that a more stringent standard must be met to fully achieve inclusivity, security and innovation.
I think the next step to take is to ensure we raise the bar, in the area of inclusion, in the area of enhancing security of our cyberspace, as well as in the area of innovation. This we promise we are going to do and make a case, for this.
Having concluded their discussions and put forth essential recommendations, participants are optimistic that there will be a concerted effort to implement these recommendations. The goal is to make sure that Africa's internet ecosystem becomes more inclusive, entirely secure, and realizes its full potential for innovation. Victor Matthias, Channels Television News.
And we're joined by the Program Manager, Africa Internet Governance Forum 2023, Joshua Joshua. He joins us virtually from Abuja, the nation's capital. Hello, Joshua.
Hi, good evening. How are you doing?
Yeah, so what are the key recommendations made at the end of this year's Africa Internet Governance Forum?
Very importantly, it's important to say that we tried different parts of this year's event, and one of them would be the fact that we have 7 different countries represented via their members of parliament. And something key that we did this year was the fact that we had the closed-door sections with these members of parliament, and what we wanted to talk about was about to see how we can be able to have some capacity buildings with them to see how, these feedbacks that we have in the different rooms, how can we take them back to the different countries and try to actualize them. And we were very fortunate to be able to have different partners who kind of, key into this. And then at the end of the day, we figured out that it wasn't going to be useful if we have the internet shut down, apparently. Because for now, for example, I am in Abuja, and then people are hearing from different places. The internet also allows this to happen. So we believe that if the internet is free and fair, it will kind of enhance the fact that the internet is key, and also a freedom of speech, or it's also we have freedom of speech. The internet is also a freedom or a human right issue. We kind of got to that agreement. We also figured out that infrastructure is very important, and we also need to work together to figure out how we all can have good infrastructure to make the internet accessible. We had those conversations, and at the end of the day, we had the different parliament, stakeholders group, and the rest accepting this stuff. We came up with a communique that we feel that the internet should be, be a strong case for Africa, and we should have this as in the back of our hearts that regardless of where we come from, regardless of what we do, that the internet is key to all businesses we do. And pretty much we have a communique, which is pretty much on the website that anyone could check out to see the different issues. We had over 750 people, and then we had over somewhere around 10 key points that we highlighted, and people could check that out, actually.
And to what extent have previous recommendations been implemented, and what grounds were gained after that implementation, if at all?
Yeah, the tricky part is that the Internet Governance Forum, it speaks more of policy, and for people who understand policy, you figure out that policy can only recommend and allow the state government to see how they can actualize. But in formally, we never had the head of state, not head of state, the members of parliament in these conversations. We would always have someone representing the government, someone representing the technical community, and then civil society and private sector. But we have gone in a way where we figure out that in the African continent, that the government holds a very key role to play in this. And so what we did this year was to say, if we have the members of parliament in same room, and we've talked about these recommendations and see how they can actually have it, when they go back to their different parliaments, they can be able to push this in, and we will know how far we have gone. And so over the years, what we have done is we keep these recommendations to the head of state via the African Union Commission. And some of them have been neutralized. We have some different countries that have tried to rectify some of this stuff. Some of these conversations, maybe towards cybersecurity, maybe towards data governance, maybe towards any key conversations where we see. This year we focused a bit on data governance, and together we have something called the African Union Data Governance Framework, and we believe that even after this, and after speaking to these guys, they will go back to the different countries and see how we can actually actualize that.
And what...
But we can only recommend,
Yeah, so what commitment did the Nigerian Secretariat make to follow up and find solutions to Nigerian-based issues?
No,
very quickly, your last comment.
I apologize. I lost that question, sorry.
I said, what commitment did the Nigerian Secretariat make to find solutions to Nigerian-based issues?
Because we are continental, and what we do is we have a regional branch called the Nigerian Internet Governance, and then we believe that with all those outputs that have come up from this event, the Nigerian Internet Governance will also try to see how they recommend with the Parliament. Fun fact is that we had the chair for the Senate Cybersecurity and in the room. We also had the chair for the House Committee on Cybersecurity and Science in the room. Now, the concept is that we've had this conversation with them, and we believe that they'll take this to the different parliaments and try to see how we can adjust few policies and make them actually sit right for the Nigerian man who actually wants to use the internet in a good way.
Right. Joshua, thank you so much for joining us on the program today, and best of luck.
Happy to. Grateful.
That's Network Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.